Coming everybody, my name is Steve Porter. I'm the president of the Association of Rhode Island Authors. And also, I guess I moonlight as the founder and president of Stillwater River Publications, which is a small hybrid publisher here in Rhode Island. When we first started doing this expo 5 years ago, I think that we were really impressed with the number of readers who would turn out. But we were equally impressed with the number of people who were writing and had amazing stories to tell and had a tremendous amount of talent, but really didn't know what to do next. It's one thing to be able to, with all this new technology and ebooks and print-on-demand publishing and self-publishing, to open the door to so many new voices and writers, but once they get through that door, they have no idea what to do next. So today we thought we would put a panel together to talk specifically about it. We're going to leave, I was basically required by all the panelists to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. And also, if you can't hear us, I think it sounds good to me, but if you can't hear us, any one of us, let us know, because each of the mics is on a different volume level. So to start, I will start with Marie Force here on my right, and I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly, tell you a little bit about who they are and their background.
Hi, I'm Marie. I'm a contemporary romance author. I've written 65 books. I also run an author services division of my business that helps authors who are interested in self-publishing through formatting and editing and cover design and whatnot. We help everybody find the resources that they need to bring their books to life. I do a lot of workshops and speaking and other things like that, but mostly I'm first and foremost a romance author.
Hi, I'm Mike Squatrito. I'm the Vice President of the Association of Rhode Island Authors, and I'm also the author of the Overlord's Fantasy Book Series. I've self-published that. I have 3 books in that series. I'm working on the 4th one. And by day I'm an engineer, so that should tell you that you don't always make all your money writing books, so keep that in mind.
Hi, my name is Satin, and I am a romantic suspense author. I actually was a financial advisor for many years, and I self-published my first book. It came out in 2015. My second book came out in August. So, yeah, and I'm currently writing the 3rd book. It will be a trilogy, the Harper Sisters series.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So first topic I want to broach is, what are the publishing options that are available today? And if you go back 10, 15 years, you really didn't have a lot of choices. You could try to either find yourself an agent and go through the traditional publishing process, or fill up your garage with books and hope you could find a distributor or a bookstore somewhere to take pity on you. But today, with the technological changes, there are a lot of options. So I'll put it to our panelists to talk a little bit about that. If you're a new author and you're a first-time writer and you're looking to break into this business, what are your publishing options?
So for me, I've been traditionally published since 2008 without interruption, and I've been indie published since 2010 without interruption. 75% of my career revenue has come from my 40 indie books, and 25% of my career revenue has come from 25 traditionally published books. So you can see that where the money is on the indie side. I often encourage new authors to consider indie publishing first, and by indie I mean self-published, independent publishing, and to try to build a little bit of a platform for yourself so that you have something, if you have a big dream to see your book in Barnes & Noble or on the shelves, to go indie first, build up your following, get some cachet, if you will, to have in your pocket when you approach agents and editors trying to get a traditional deal. The more they pay for you to get you in the door, the more they do for you. If you're a brand new and debut author, you'll be lucky to get a $5,000 advance, and for that $5,000 advance, you will see an equivalent effort on their part.
I went the self-publishing route. Originally, when my first book was finished around 2006, I started trying to go the traditional route, trying to find agents, and couldn't find anybody. So I decided to self-publish, and I've done that for all 3 books, and I will do that again for the 4th book. It's kind of easy to do that with all the technology we have now. I go through CreateSpace on Amazon, and it's basically, if you know what you're doing, it's free, but as anything, nothing's really free. You need good cover art, you need a good editor to make sure your book is done well, and you need somebody to format the book and things like that to get it in book form. But I wouldn't say don't try to find an agent or someone to take on your book. It's a good thing to do to see how hard it is, and then you can appreciate that all the hard work that you do and the extra steps that you take to maybe get your book self-published, then you can finally see that product in the end. For years I was like, I have this great story and no one's ever going to read it unless they read it out of my little binder that I had printed the whole thing out and handed to people. But now with self-publishing, and especially with Amazon's platform, you can really get your book out there in front of a lot of people.
I have to agree with Mike. I'm also self-published, and I highly encourage it. The tools are out there, but there are other considerations as well why I think self-publishing is a good way to go. You get a higher commission, so with Amazon you can make 70% commission. You're never going to get 70% going traditional. If you're a new author, you're probably looking at 7 to 9%. You also have more creative say in your title, in your books, in your branding, in your marketing, because you own it. You have to do it. On the reverse side of that, you own it. You have to do all of that legwork. You have to do all of that research. So it really depends on your own personality. If you're willing to take on that responsibility and you know you're a go-getter, you know that you're willing to continue your education, you're not just going to learn something and sit on it, but it's a constant learning for the rest of the time that you want to be an author, then self-publishing is a viable option. If you know that you're the kind of person who needs to have wants to have somebody hold your hand a little bit and walk you through the steps, then maybe traditional publishing or small press might be a way to go. So either way, whichever direction you go, you're going to be in charge of creating your own internet presence, your own branding, your own marketing. You're going to be the one that's going to have to book a lot of your author events. Even if you go traditional, you're going to be expected to do that legwork. So be aware of that no matter what.
One of the first things I talk to new writers about when they come to us saying, they want to be a published author, or should they go find a traditional contract and find an agent, or should they self-publish? I think the first question to ask yourself if you're in that boat is, what are your expectations for the book? Not every book that's ever written should be destined for the top of the New York Times bestsellers list. You might want to be the best-selling author just in your hometown, or just in your state, not necessarily in the world. But if that is also your goal, is to grow your publishing and your writing career, then sometimes the path you take for one of those goals is different from the other. And I think the first thing is to start to learn about the business and learn about the industry and how publishers work and how bookstores work and how libraries work. There's a lot of the narratives and the information that's out there probably isn't 100% accurate all the time. So that kind of leads into my next question for the panel. Mike, I'll start with you. We'll take turns here tonight. As you know, there are not a lot of places you can go for information about how to become a published author, other than the internet. So did you have any advice where people could go to find information about the business and resources?
Well, a lot of things you get, the internet's the biggest thing. Depending on what you want to do, like Steve said, and what you want to accomplish with your book, places that you can go. I wrote a fantasy book, so I went online and I started looking for agents that deal just with fantasy, publishing houses that deal just with fantasy. So you want to narrow your focus to what your book's genre is. And then from there, there's a lot of places you can go online that have like groups. Facebook has groups of different kind of authors, different kind of writing groups and things like that. And then the next thing you want to do is, again, decide what you want to do, traditional publish or self-publish. If you self-publish, you can kind of do what you want. Okay? If you're going to go traditional publishing, you're going to do your homework, you're going to decide what agents you may want to go with, if they represent that kind of book that you're writing, and they will go to the publishing houses that deal with that. So that's kind of where I would say to start. Internet is always a good place for information, and anybody you deal with, agent, publishers, make sure they're reputable and they have good reviews and they're sanctioned by was it the Association of Agents? Is a title that they're, I can't remember what it was, but make sure they're honest, good people, and then I would go from there.
Yes, so there are a lot of different resources that you can go to. There's like the Creative Pen. I don't know if you've heard of that. David Gokran does something. He's written a book called Let's Get Digital, which I think is really good. He also has a website full of information. There's a website called The Book Designer that does specifically looks at the cover design, and he does a cover contest once a month, and he's been doing it for 7 years. And you can actually go back and look at the various covers, and he's written critiques on those covers. So it's like a crash course in book cover design, and you can go back and can look at that, and that's free resources that you can just go look at. You just have to go and take the time and the effort and do it. Susan K. Quinn is a self-directed or self-published author who does sci-fi, YA sci-fi. She's also done a series of books. The first of is Indie Author Survival Guide. I cannot recommend that book highly enough. Next to Stephen King's On Writing, I think it's required reading, in my opinion. And her second books, the following books that come up after it, are also very good. So that's just kind of a handful of resources that I have found useful. Facebook groups are also really good, and what I would say is try to find self-published authors who are leading the career that you hope to lead. And read their books, look them up on their websites, see if they have a Facebook group, and start building your community of authors and readers online. And it's a community. It's not just about lurking and not commenting. It's not just about, maybe you've published a book, buy my book, by the way, can you buy my book? It's nothing like that. It's about building a network and a community of authors and readers that are specifically within your genre, but open it up, be willing to open it up. The self-published author community is so helpful and willing to share what they know, and you'll find that it's very welcoming. So I highly recommend those.
I run 2 author groups. One of them is the Author Support Network on Facebook, and we have 4,500 authors in there. Most of them are indie published. A lot of them are hybrid, which is the term that we use for people who are both traditionally published and indie published. And I also have a Yahoo loop that has like 3,500 people on that one too, and there's a lot of good information there. And you can find both of those at marieforce.com/authors. We have a very drama-free community in both places. I'm very anti-drama in my entire life, and I don't allow it in either community. And so in that regard, it makes for a good place to hang out with other authors without a lot of the, lack of a better word, bullshit that goes on in some of the other groups. And yeah, I have a no bullshit policy in my entire life. So there's all sorts of resources, like the others have said, about places that you can go to find out how to do things and where to go. And there's workshops. I offer them, other authors offer them. There's all sorts of online workshops that you can take. I do a Self-Pub 101. I do it at least quarterly. We always have a great turnout and lots of good questions and stuff that give people all the information that they need to get started. A lot of the focus in the indie world is on Amazon, and I just really want to make sure that everybody is aware that Amazon is but one player in the indie world. I make a tremendous living. I could live independently on what I make on iBooks. So iBooks, Nook Press can be very lucrative. Google Play has a store that can be hard to get into, but there are they've shut it off for new authors. But there's a number of different third-party ways to get into Google Play, and also Kobo, which is basically the Kindle of Canada. And Kobo has been very lucrative for me in my business. And there's also audio. All of my books are in audio. All of them are in print. Foreign translations are very lucrative. So there's a lot of different ways to monetize your story once you, you know, make that first step. But people tend to be overly focused, in my opinion, just on Amazon, when Amazon is but one piece of the puzzle.
I'd also like to mention, too, that if you're here at the Expo, obviously you are, we do have a writer's resource area at the back of the room this year. It's sponsored by Cardi's. Back there you'll find organizations such as RIRW, Rhode Island Romance Writers, and Independent Publishers of New England. And I'm going to forget people if I start to mention them all. The different conferences and writing groups and author groups. These are a great first place to start. Because that collaborative marketing, that ability to get together with other writers and authors is just incredibly valuable. And to be able to ask up front when you have someone standing right in front of you and you can ask the real questions that have been eating at you, I think is an extremely effective way to do it. So the next topic I want to jump on briefly is, because I know that one of the big complaints I hear from a lot of the authors, even some that are here today, when they go out online and they see all these amazing offers from these companies that are going to make you a best-selling author just for, you know, the sign on the bottom line. How do you know, what do you look for when you go online for the first time to start doing research and looking at a lot of these companies that are going to help you? What advice would you give? Satin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, there are a couple of red flags, I think. First off, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Just gonna throw that out there. That's probably a good thing for life in general. So, you know. Are you paying them? If you're paying them, then I would say proceed with caution. If they're getting the money out of you as opposed to out of the sales of your books, then their motivation is to squeeze you, not sell your books. So that might be something to think about. Are you required to buy X amount of copies of your own book? That's a red flag as far as I'm concerned. Also, look at what else they have published. Are they doing well? Are those books, do they look professional? Can you tell that they're self-published or small press? Do they look a little chintzy? I mean, we can be honest, that there are some covers that look like they've been done in your basement, you know? So, like, you know, go look at the books and see what else they have produced. Where are they popping up? If you're not impressed with that product, then you don't want to be that product, you know? So I definitely throw those red flags out. If they're coming to you, if you're not going to them, if they're coming to you and you're kind of unknown and you don't have a huge following and you're wondering how they got your name, then maybe proceed with caution. That's probably a shark. So those would be those red flags for me.
Yeah, basically, you nailed it. Basically, everything what she said. You want to look out for, they call them vanity presses, and like they said, they say, hey, you can get your book out there, we'll help you, and then it's $1,500 for a book cover, and then it's $200 an hour for this guy to do this. Then and it keeps adding up and adding up, and then you have to buy X amount of books. Just to let you know, I might be off with the number, but I think 93% of authors don't sell more than 1,000 copies. It just happens. And if you're required to spend, you know, X amount of dollars to buy 2,500 books, you know, you're making a major investment. I do a lot of presentations around the state and within the organization. And one of the slides that comes up, it's in big red bold letters that says, "Don't break the bank." Okay? Everybody has a dream. They want to be an author. They want to be a best-selling author. But it comes at a cost. And everybody has to realize, what is your number? It's going to be different for everybody else. I can tell you, you probably can't do anything for free, but you shouldn't be spending tens of thousands of dollars. You want to be able to build your following and make your sales and everything in a way that is, you know, that you don't break the bank.
You're not losing your house.
Yeah, don't make major investment, especially like what she said. If they're coming to you, a red flag. You're going to probably have to do a lot of soliciting, like I said before, for agents and publishers. So let's keep an eye on that.
One thing I'll add is there's only one thing that's going to make you a best-selling author, and that's your book. and often a lot of them. Very rarely does somebody hit the bestseller list with their first book. I hit the New York Times list with my 25th book, and USA Today was probably, I think, my 20th. But it didn't happen overnight, and it's a an organic process if you're doing it the way you should be doing it. And if somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, if you pay me X number of dollars, I'll make you a best-selling author," well, frankly, if your book stinks, there's nothing that they can do that's going to make you a best-selling author, because it really just depends on the book. And so much of what goes on around us is just noise. And there's a whole cottage industry that's grown up around indie publishing, and people. I know a lot of people at first who went through agents to self-publish and have given them 15% in perpetuity of their indie published book for basically doing something that my company could do on a fee-for-service basis for $400. And if I'd have given, say for example, my Gansett Island series to an agent and given her 15%, it would have cost me millions of dollars for something that I could do myself for $500. So you never know what book's going to break out. You never know what series is going to break out. You never know which one's going to be your runaway bestseller. And if you've given somebody a percentage of that, then you're potentially talking about a lot of money that could have been in your pocket for something that you could have paid a flat fee for. So watch out for agents. There's a lot of them out there that are making a lot of promises. Agents are in a very particular spot in this new order of publishing. They're not as relevant as they once were, and they know it, and there's a smack of desperation among some of them. If they're coming to you, look out, because agents don't come to authors, authors go to agents. If agents want a percentage of your indie published books, say no. And remember that success is all about the books. Every time I do any kind of presentation like this, I'm like, I wouldn't be here if people didn't like my books, because nobody would care what I had to say. So it's all about the books. And that's really all it's about, is the books.
That's a great segue into my next question, which is editing.
Yes.
I think it seems like there's a real obvious answer to that question, which is yes, you need to have a well-edited book. However, so many don't. And I just let everybody speak to you about the importance of that, having a good editor to work with. I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll just say I'm a trained copy editor, and I wouldn't begin to edit my own. I cannot believe what I miss in my own books. And I've done it on newspapers, I've done it for magazine, I've been involved in copy editing and reporting and journalism my entire adult life, and I would never, ever put a book out that wasn't professionally edited by at least 2 other people.
Yeah, editing is, it's great to get your book done, but that's only the first process. When I do presentations, I call it the 4-pass editing process. And the first pass is to dump it out of your head. You have to have something. And I go to schools and I say, hey, to the kids, if I just handed this in, what would I get? Probably get a C. Then next time you do another pass and you keep editing and character development and all that kind of stuff. And you get it to a certain point where you think, okay, this is great. Now you get your editor. And then that person is going to be like your first grade teacher, and he's going to mark that all up. But you need that process. So you need to do your work as best as you can, and then go to somebody that's a professional, and then that'll get it, hopefully market ready. And then once you get to that point, you've done your due diligence. You got to get that done, especially if you're self-publishing, because that was a stigma that, hey, anybody can self-publish, and that's true. So if you just dump something out of your head, put a cover on it, and get it out the door, you have a book, but it's not a good book. Like Marie said, if it's not a good book, no one's going to buy it. So take the time and the effort to get it edited properly, get it done, get a great cover design, and then you can go out the door that way. And editors are not free. This would be one of the expenses, so be prepared to pay for that, and it's well worth the expense. So,
what everybody said, yes, you need an editor. I think we've established that for sure. When I wrote my first book, and I was sitting with my rough draft, and I was thinking, okay, everybody's telling me I need an editor, now what? How do I get an editor again? So a couple things that I learned when I first looked for an editor. There are different types of editors. There's developmental editing, which is the meat and potatoes, big stuff. big, like, you know, they're looking at the plot lines, they're looking at your character arcs, they're looking at the way that your story holds together. So that's going to cost more, as you can imagine. There's also copy editing, there's proofreading. So you should know that there's different types of editing. Sometimes you can find an editor that's more of a hybrid, which is what I went with. So they are out there. There are different editors tend to get paid in different ways. So you can find editors that are done by hours, by time. So they're going to charge you per hour. You can find editors that are going to charge you per word or per page. So when you start making a budget, you know, and you start looking at how are they going to charge you, that's something that you need to be aware of. When you find an editor that fits within your budget, don't just find one. Find, I would say, 3 to 5 potential editors that you can look up that you think are reputable, that you've gone and done your due diligence, seen what other books they've edited, seen how they've performed, maybe read a few and see how you like it. You know, then contact them, say you'd be interested in doing editing, and then ask if you can send a sample of your writing. A lot of times they'll ask anyway, but definitely you want to try to do a sample of your writing. Anywhere from 5 to 10 pages tends to be about standard. And get those notes back and then start comparing those editors and seeing which one are you going to be able to work with. Did they get your 5 to 10 pages on time? Back to you on time, within a timely manner. If they took a couple months, maybe that's not going to be the editor that you want to go with. So those are all kind of considerations that I had to learn when I was first hiring an editor. The other thing is, once you have decided to go with a specific editor, set expectations early and then refer back to them often. So don't just send your manuscript and hope you see it within the next 6 to 9 months and, gee, you know, I haven't heard from my editor in a while. Like, set expectations. Say, hey, you know, I'd like to see what progress you've made on a weekly basis, you know, or on a monthly basis. If you could just give me your corrections, or how do you best work? If you're not familiar, say, how do you best work? You know, how often can I expect to hear from you? Set those expectations early so that you're not just sitting in the wind hoping that you get your manuscript sometime back in the next year. So those would be some concrete things that I would look for.
I think the 2 mistakes that most first-time authors make is they decide when they see what good editors cost, they think, well, there's an area I can save some money because I get an A in English in high school. Or I have a best friend who got an A in English in high school. And you really need, if there's one area you're going to invest in, it's in editing. That's got to come first. And not only in editing, but someone who has experience editing books. Not someone who's good at English, not someone who's a copywriter, not someone who writes public relations or press releases or other things, but someone who has the eye and understands the structure and the build on books.
Preferably in your genre. Books in your genre, too. That's what I was
In your genre. That's a great point. Now, I had a whole bunch of other questions, but I know we want to leave a chunk of time here at the end for your questions. So what I'll do is I want to open it up to the audience, see what topics you've got burning in your mind that you'd like us to discuss and go over. Does anybody have a question?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it, so if you want to repeat the question, go ahead and answer it.
She wants to know about how much should she save approximately, what kind of budget should she, you know, hold on to?
I think that depends on how much editing you need. If you're brand new and you have literally never written anything, you're probably going to need the full-on developmental editing, which is expensive. It can get into the thousands. For somebody, it depends on your genre. Like in the romance genre, you probably won't spend thousands for developmental editing, but in like young adult or fantasy you might. So it just depends on what you're writing. And an autobiography, I don't know anything about nonfiction, but I think the big thing is to expect to pay for the basics. In my company, we can get you out the door with copy editing, proofreading, cover design, and basic formatting for all the major platforms for probably around $1,000 to $1,500. But it depends on the editing is the unknown, you know. So yeah, that's always the ringer.
Anyone else?
I had something to add on that actually. So I can tell you for myself, I budgeted $1,200 to get my book produced for my first book. That's including print cover, ebook cover, print formatting, ebook formatting, editing. But what I didn't know, the things that I had to learn here, is you should definitely also plan for marketing and advertising and everything. And you're probably not going to do a whole lot of that if it's just one book, but definitely think about that going, you want to do a little bit of a run-up before your release. You're definitely looking at some kind of marketing strategy after your release. A lot of that, you don't have to spend a lot of money on that, but you should definitely include that in your budget.
And don't spend too much money on marketing one book, because one of the lessons I always try to teach other authors is if you're in the author business, you're in a retail business. It's inventory. So like if you opened a store and you had a single pair of pants and a shirt and a pair of shoes, as soon as they're sold, you're out of business.
Right.
It's the same for authors. I mean, if you have one book and you mortgage the farm to promote that one book, well, the readers love that book, but then what? There's nothing left for them to buy. So I often tell authors, especially genre authors who are going to be, writing series or producing, a large quantity of books, is wait till you have 10 and then go crazy, because then you might get the money back because there's 10 books for them to buy. So the more money you put out with 1 or 2 or 3 books, the less chance you have of return on that investment, because you don't have any inventory for them to buy at the end of that cycle.
And also prioritize the money that you do have in your budget for editing, and also make sure you have a good cover. I mean, those would be the 2 #1 high priorities I would think is.
I'd say so, and whenever you say good cover, also in a cover that is appropriate to your genre.
Yes, do your research. I cannot say highly enough. Like, do your research. Go and look at what are the top what are the bestsellers within your genre. What are some commonalities of those covers? And when you're going to hire a cover artist, you should actually, what I did is I went to Pinterest. I made myself a board, romantic suspense covers. And I went to the bestsellers and I pinned those covers, and on those pins, I wrote comments of what was working and what wasn't. Oh, I really like the placement of this title, or the size of this title. I really like this author. I like these are the themes. I like this color. What have you? So do your research. Have a board, and then when you go hire a cover artist, point them to that board, and that will get the conversation started in a good direction. So at least you'll be on the same page.
Do we have other questions? Yeah, back there.
I use them. I have a couple that have been with me most of my career, and they came to me organically through my early books, and they've been with me all along. And for somebody new, I would say 2 things to really keep in mind. One, be very careful who you give that digital file to, because once it's out of your possession, it's gone forever. And if you don't want to see it on pirate sites, make sure you know who you're giving it to. So don't just get all excited to find somebody who's interested in reading your book and then give them the book, because it happened to Stephanie Meyer, it can happen to you, So digital files are gold, and I don't give mine to anyone for any reason. So except for people like my beta readers who've been with me for 10 years, and I know that they're not going to do anything nefarious with my book. But to find them, it's really kind of an organic process. I would recommend, you start to network with people on Facebook and other authors in your genre. You can get into, one of the things I didn't mention too, like in the romance business, we have the Romance Writers of America, and there's chapters all over the country. There's not one in Rhode Island, but there's one in New England. There's online chapters for the various genres. There's the Mystery Writers of America. There's, every single organization, every single genre of fiction has an organization attached to it, just about, where you can find other like-minded authors, where you can get into even more critique partners than beta readers at first, and then you start to realize who you can trust, and but be very careful who you give that book to.
The other thing I was going to say about beta readers too is actually, I cannot speak highly enough about building up your author community, and I'm not just talking online, although that's definitely one aspect, but look locally. There are so many writers groups. I mean, obviously we have Association of Rhode Island Authors right here, so this is ARIA is a great resource, but there are writers groups throughout your communities. I found my first writers group through NaNoWriMo, and they've been with me the longest. And so if you're not familiar with NaNoWriMo, that's every November. Write 50,000 words in 30 days. We just finished. Hopefully you guys did well if you participated. So build up your community, and then you're going to find friends and writers and fellow authors who are going to be interested in your process, in your journey as an author, and that's where I found a lot of my beta readers, as well as my friends and family. Also, I would say, don't just send your manuscript to your friend, your mom. She's going to be like, oh, I loved it. It was so great, you know. So when I sent my beta manuscript, I sent it with 10 questions. You know, things like, where did you put the where did you first put the book down? If everybody's putting the book down at the exact same place, I probably need to go back and look at the pacing of that. So, you know, think of a couple of questions that you want to include with that are constructive, that are going to give you some responses that, you know, are going to help you, and not just be like, oh, it was awesome, I loved it. Yeah. It's lovely, but you need something a little more constructive than that.
Okay, great. Do we have any other questions? How do you find indie publishers?
Well, the Publishers Weekly, I mean the Publishers Marketplace, sorry, not Publishers Weekly. Publishers Marketplace is a great place to look for who's publishing what. You can put in the genre that you're publishing and find out what editors are acquiring in that genre. It's a good place to start. You can ask around in other author groups, like you're talking like indie publishers, meaning like small press. So in your genre, I mean, there's always going to be available information through like the groups that I just mentioned, like RWA or Mystery Writers of America, or you know the other groups they vet the authors, and I mean the editors and the publishers for you, and they'll there's another thing called Predators and Editors where you can go and look. You know, I'm not sure that they're still keeping that up to speed the way they once did, but all the troublesome ones are on there. And you know, the thing too is I often hear people say, oh, I signed with so-and-so and it turned out to be a complete disaster. And like if you had just Googled them, you'll find out that it's a complete disaster before you sign away rights that are going to take you half a lifetime to get back. So ask around in the author community before you sign with anyone, because every publisher has a reputation.
There's also a great resource on Facebook called Writers Beware that tracks a lot of less scrupulous.
Yeah, make sure you go, I mean, go online and do due diligence, like you said, just to make sure that who you're potentially going to deal with is reputable. Because that's the worst thing that can happen, is something that you put your heart and soul in, and then it gets taken by somebody that's, you know, doesn't have your best interest in mind. So just do your due diligence.
Okay. Do you have a question in the back?
I've known some authors who have met with quite a bit of success. I don't know if you heard what she was saying, but she's published quite a bit through Wattpad.
Okay.
She's been doing Wattpad. And is that a good idea? That's her question.
Okay.
So it can be a good idea. There's no one right way to do anything. So I don't think it's a bad idea. You certainly have potential to find some readers and a following, and build your brand, build your marketing, and exercise your writing muscles, which I think is always a good idea. So those are all positive things. I've known some authors who've made that jump from Wattpad to publishing full-on books and, you know, becoming an author. So it's not impossible to do that. That's certainly one viable way to do it. Sure.
And as many authors as there are, there's a different story for every one of them about how they managed to come from nothing to something. Wattpad has certainly launched careers, there's no question about it. I just find that there's a disconnect on Wattpad between people who want free content and what I want is people who want to buy my books. And I don't find that there's a big carryover between Wattpad and then people who are going to actually pay money for books. They want more free stuff. And I have one book on Wattpad that is one of my freebies, and I get emails once in a while from people who've read that on Wattpad, and they're like, well, why can't I get the next one free? And I'm like, well, because I'm doing this for a living, you know?
I have to eat.
Yeah, so I find that there's a lot of that, like, free grubbing on Wattpad. So I'm not saying, I know people, I have a couple of authors, friends who are, they write together as Christina Lauren, and they came up through fan fiction. They were writing fan fiction that became insanely popular. And it could have been on Wattpad, I'm not even sure. But they're now like runaway bestseller authors, and they started out in the fan fiction world. So for every author, there's a different story of how they got started. So nothing is impossible.
Yeah, I've heard a number of authors who have come up through Wattpad and been very successful. I'm trying to remember, there's one, I can't remember her name right now, but she used it more as a platform builder to find readers and work, and she was writing fan fiction, trying to develop her writing style, and she started picking up followers. And when she got up around 2 or 3 million,
maybe I should. That's a good time to make the leap.
She made the leap, and now has I know she's with Harper at the moment. We have time for one more question, and then we'll have to wrap up the session. Anyone else?
You definitely want to copyright, especially in this era where Amazon is requiring more and more for authors to prove that they own the book that they're publishing, because there's been a lot of tomfoolery going on in the digital world with people stealing and republishing other people's books by changing character names and things like that. It's rampant. It's rampant. So I recommend that you don't copyright until you are the book is being published, because the Library of Congress wants they want the finished version. They don't want a work in progress. And if you're submitting to a reputable publisher, you don't need to worry about having your book copyrighted before you send it in. A reputable publisher is not going to steal it from you. Right. Like when I was first writing my first book, I was thinking like, oh my God, somebody's going to steal my idea, because it was kind of a high concept sort of thing. And it took me a long time to realize that nobody else could have executed that high concept the same way I did. So like they might steal the idea, but they'll never write the same book as you. But the bottom line is reputable publishers, reputable authors who you might be dealing with as far as critique partners or networking, and you're going to ask them for a blurb or something like that. They're not going to steal your book. So, but reputable is the key word. Wait, I would wait, yes. But you want to do it. As soon as the book is ready for publication, one of our release day automatic things is we copyright the book on release day. And now that makes it difficult to say to Amazon, oh, well, I have this book, but at least you can show that you filed the paperwork. So it takes about four or 5 months to get the certificate back, but all of mine are copyrighted. And if you start to feel like you're going to be in like a situation where you're going to publish a lot of books, and you're going to want to form a corporation in Rhode Island, it definitely behooves you to copyright the books to the corporation and not to yourself personally.
And in fact, to also tie that in to our association, the Association of Rhode Island Authors meets on the second Thursday of every month. Our January meeting, our speaker is an attorney who's going to be talking about those very things, and the meeting's free to attend. We meet in Coventry, so you can go to our website, riauthors.org, for directions, and certainly join us that night. And if you question the importance of copyright, stop by Jim Dyer's table at Fenham Publishing in the back wall here, where he won a copyright suit recently. And because he had his paperwork filed and everything legal done right, he not only won the suit, but got some very nice damages to go along with it. So it does pay off, and it is a smart thing to do, especially if you're considering being a writer for the long haul.
Just writing the book is not enough. That's a fallacy.
Okay, so at this time we have hit our deadline, so I want to thank our panelists for some great advice, and thank all of you for attending. So please enjoy the show. Thank you.